All right, Shalom. I want to start off by giving our praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from. And I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. And today is Tuesday, but it's going to be another episode of Missile Monday. So today is Tuesday, June 9th, 2026, Missile Monday, and I have this article from the Times of India, and it says India now has 190 nuclear warheads. What's driving New Delhi's or Delhi's atomic buildup? So I'm just going to go into this article, bring out a couple of scriptures. Lord willing, this lesson is edifying and straight to the point, and no, I'm not going to read the whole thing because it is kind of lengthy. But as always, I will link it in the description box for those that want to check it out. So it says, India's estimated nuclear arsenal has increased from 180 nuclear warheads to 190 warheads, according to the latest assessment by the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute, or the SIPRI, or SIPRI, reflecting New Delhi's continued efforts to modernize its strategic deterrent amid a rapidly evolving security environment. The findings were released as part of SIPRI Yearbook 2026, which warns that the world is entering a new era of nuclear competition, with major powers increasingly relying on atomic weapons as instruments of national power. SIPRI estimated that the 9 nuclear-armed nations, the United States, Russia, the United Kingdom, France, China, India, Pakistan, North Korea, and Israel, continued to upgrade and expand their nuclear capabilities during 2025, which is exactly what each one of those nations did. The report noted that global nuclear arsenals are no longer shrinking at the pace seen after the Cold War, and may begin growing again as disarmament slows and deployment of new weapons accelerates. And that's exactly what's happening. All of these different nuclear armed nations, they're all going to up their nuclear arsenal. And even though 10 is not a significant number, but still, they, talking about India, went from 180, warheads, now they have 190, so this is biblical prophecy, which it speaks of in Joel, the 3rd chapter, which I'm going to grab, but there isn't going to be any slowing down, of this arms race that is taking place, because again, the New START treaty was for the, Russia and the United States to, limit the number of, warheads that they could develop or have, ready, or in service, but now that there's no treaties or, anything in place that, will limit, the expansion of their nuclear arsenal, then that's what's going to take place. So again, it's not going to be like how it was during the Cold War. Things aren't going to slow down. Things are actually going to speed up, and if India increased their nuclear arsenal, nothing is stopping the rest of the nuclear armed nations from doing the exact same thing, which they are doing. Let's just read a little bit more. It says, for India, the increase of 10 warheads over the previous estimate comes alongside the development of longer-range delivery systems, sea-based deterrent capabilities, and technologies such as multiple independently targetable reentry vehicle, or MIRVs. SIPRI said India is believed to have once again slightly expanded its nuclear arsenal in 2025 and continued development of new types of nuclear delivery systems. The expansion comes against the backdrop of rising tensions in Asia, growing strategic competition with China, and continued rivalry with Pakistan. CIPRI's assessment suggests that India's nuclear modernization program is increasingly orientated towards strengthening deterrence against China while maintaining readiness in retaliation to Pakistan. The CIPRI yearbook paints a concerning picture of the global security environment. Of the world's estimated 12,187 nuclear warheads in January 2026, around 9,745 were held in military stockpiles for potential use. Approximately 4,012 warheads were already deployed in operational missile and aircraft systems, while between 2,100 and 2,200 remained on high operational alert. CIPRI Director Karim Hagag warned that the growing reliance on nuclear weapons could increase the risk of It says the growing reliance on nuclear weapons could increase the risk of catastrophic miscalculation. Influential voices, including some world leaders, are advocating nuclear weapons as a guarantee against attack by a hostile state, but making national defense and security strategies more dependent on nuclear weapons could significantly increase nuclear risks, as Slakia said, CIPRI Director Karim Hagag, and that's exactly what they're going to do, because all of these nations, they're on edge, man, but everybody's got their eyes on who? On America, Now, as we know, again, not China, but India, just like it says, they're in competition with China, but India is also, at war with Pakistan, and Pakistan and India are neighboring, countries, but that's everyone's stance, as it stands. All of these different nations, they possess these weapons, to deter other nations from using them, which there is a set time when all of these nations that possess them are going to use them, Says he added, the dangers associated with nuclear weapons are growing due to advances in weapon technology, the breakdown of nuclear arms control, and heightened geopolitical tensions, among a range of other factors. At the same time, world events, not least the outbreak of conflict between nuclear-armed India and Pakistan, are challenging nuclear deterrence logic. CIPRI researchers argue that decades of gradual nuclear reductions led by the United States and Russia may now be ending, and they are. As older warheads are retired more slowly and new systems enter service more rapidly, global stockpiles could begin rising in the coming years, and they are. Because again, America is on borrowed time. We'll see exactly how long this place has left, but this is exactly what these different nations are doing that possess these weapons. They're going to increase their stockpile, So it says India's modernization increasingly focused on China. According to CIPRI, India's nuclear modernization program is increasingly geared towards developing long-range systems capable of reaching targets throughout China, while Pakistan remains a critical component of India's strategic planning. Beijing's growing military capabilities and expanding nuclear arsenal are influencing China full force. Beijing's growing military capabilities and expanding nuclear arsenal are influencing Indian force development. So it says China remains the fastest growing nuclear power among the 9 nuclear armed states. SIPRI estimates that China now possesses around 620 nuclear warheads and continues expanding missile silo fields and strategic missile developments at a pace unmatched by any other country. By the end of the decade, China could potentially field as many intercontinental ballistic missiles as either the United States or Russia. Now, Russia and the United States possess the most nuclear weapons Russia and the United States, both of these countries possess the most nuclear weapons, out of all of the nuclear armed nations. America has about, over 5,000, and because I've seen different numbers, but, Russia has about, it definitely has 5,000, but, over 5 to 6,000. It has more than America, but in order for China to catch up to that, it would take time, because they have thousands. China's still in the hundreds. But again, if they're developing them fast, we'll see. But again, China is not going to surpass Russia, with nuclear weapons, because again, it's biblical prophecy that, on a small scale, Russia is going to take down America. China is just going to help, along with all of these other nuclear armed nations. They're just going to help as well. Continuing, it says, against this backdrop, India has accelerated efforts to strengthen all 3 legs of its nuclear triad: land, air, and sea based delivery systems. India continues to adhere officially to a doctrine of minimum credible deterrence and a no first use policy. However, maintaining credible deterrence increasingly requires improvements in survivability, mobility, and second strike capability as regional threats evolve. So, World War III is just continuing to, heat up, as we can see. And India is, increased their nuclear stockpile by 10 warheads. So it's going to hit a couple main points. Not going to make this one too long. And I really wish the Blue Letter would, stop asking for donations, man. Like, I just want to open the app without seeing that. But I'm going to start with the book of Joel, chapter 3 and verse 9. And it says, proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty men, let all the men of war draw near, let them come up, beat your plowshares into swords, and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say I'm strong and right. And we can see that, with India alone, which, this applies really to all the other nations, that are now nuclear armed, that didn't have this technology before, but now they have it, because again, once upon a time, China didn't have nuclear weapons. I had to do a little research to see, when they first, started to develop them, when they got their first, nukes. But either way it goes, militarily, compared to the United States, India is, a weak nation, because again, America was the only country next to Russia that had this technology. And we have to remember that, the development of these nukes is what ended, World War II, when America bombed Japan, dropped those, atomic bombs, Fat Man, a Little Boy, on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, and since then they've evolved from atomic bombs to, to nuclear weapons, that don't have to be flown over a particular target. They can reach one end of the earth and land in the other or they can be launched from one end of the earth and land on the other side with just a push of a button, you know. But this is a prime example of what India is doing. It's you know, they're exhausting their resources toward their military to up their nuclear arsenal. You know, they're gearing up for war, you know, because again, every nuclear armed nation all has the same mindset, you know, the no first use. So no country is gonna, you know, fire first unless they're fired upon, you know. But at the same time, they're all, you know, getting ready because they know that it is not truly going to be peace. You know, these weapons are going to be used, you know. But India is just an example of what the scripture is talking about, you know, letting the weak say they're strong because they have the same technology that America has as far as these nuclear weapons, you know. Now, though they don't possess as many, but they still have them, you know, and they will use them. So let's get the book of Isaiah chapter 9 and verse 5, and it says, "For every battle of the warrior is with confused noise and garments wrought in blood, but this shall be with burning and fuel of fire and right." You know, as we can clearly see that this coming world war is going to be like how traditional warfare was fought. You have, you know, a nation of men on one side of the battlefield, you know, up against, you know, another nation of men on the other side of the battlefield, you know, charging each other in the center, you know, until one nation is left standing, you know, going at it hand-to-hand combat, you know, having different weapons of war, swords, spears, shields, bow and arrows, you know. It's not going to be like that. You know, this war is primarily going to be fought with these nuclear weapons, man. You know, which is why World War III is also known as the war to end all wars, man. You know, because that is what's going to end the reign and rulership of Esau, Edom. That is going to be, you know, the tools that are going to destroy Babylon the Great, America, you know. That is, you know, how this war is going to be fought primarily, right? And as I always make mention, you will have ground troops that are going to be going to war with each other, but that is the primary way that this war is going to be fought, you know, how it's going to be ended once those nukes get launched, you know. So staying in Isaiah, let me get the book of Isaiah chapter 13 and verse 4, and it says, "The noise of a multitude in the mountains, like as of a great people, a tumultuous noise of the kingdoms of nations gathered together. The Lord of hosts mustereth the hosts of the battle." And right, you know, that great noise that it's talking about is, or that noise of a multitude is talking about the missiles, man. You know, the warheads in particular, because that's the part of the missile that is going to do the damage, you know, because again, you're going to hear them before you see them, you know, because they're going to make a very loud noise, because you're going to hear that, you know, that jettison pack, you know, guiding these warheads to their target, man, because each missile that is developed has a specific target, man, you know, and they're going to hit. Nothing is going to stop them. You know, just like it mentions in Joel, the 2nd chapter, you know, that when they fall upon a sword, you know, they shall not be wounded. So it doesn't matter what type of missile defense system, you know, these different countries have in place. Nothing is going to stop these missiles, you know, from hitting their target. Nothing. In verse 5, it says, "They come from a far country, from the end of heaven, even the Lord and the weapons of his indignation to destroy the whole land." And right, and as we know, pursuing to Genesis chapter 27 and verse 40, you know, Esau, Edom's blessing was a sword, right? But who gave him the sword, man? You know, yes, Isaac blessed, you know, Esau, but it was the Heavenly Father ultimately that gave this man this technology to take himself out, you know, because again, remember, those Russians are Edomites as well, you know. So Esau is going to take himself out, you know, with his own weaponry. But in reality, these are the Lord's weapons, man. You know, these are the Lord's weapons. They are going to be used to take Esau and Babylon down, you know. So still in Isaiah, I'm going to grab one more out of Isaiah. Let's get Isaiah 54 and verse 16. It says, Behold, I have created the smith that bloweth the coals and the fire, and that bringeth forth an instrument for his work, and I have created the waster to destroy and write. You know, these modern day scientists and physicists that are behind creating and developing these nuclear weapons, you know, they would be a modern day smith, you know, because what does a blacksmith do? You know, they create weapons of war, you know, and that's exactly what these scientists are doing. They're creating weapons of war, but not just any old weapons of war, you know, weapons of mass destruction. Because these nuclear weapons that are on the earth today have the capability, the literal capability of destroying the planet Earth, you know. But as it says in the scriptures, the earth abideth forever, you know, so the entire planet Earth won't be destroyed, but certain lands will, you know. And Babylon the Great is going to be left completely desolate, you know, because that's the primary target, America, you know. So I'm going to end it with this. This is the book of Revelation, chapter 9 and verse 15. It says, And the 4 angels were loosed, which were prepared for an hour and a day and a month and a year, for to slay the third part of men. And right, and we read Revelation, the 7th chapter, it mentions the 4 angels, which these are 4 literal angels holding back the 4 winds, which the 4 winds represent the coming destruction, aka World War III, if you will, also known as the day of the Lord, you know, that is about to come upon the planet Earth. You know, there's a set time when they're gonna, you know, unleash that destruction upon the earth. You know, just like I said, there's a particular hour, day, month, and year, you know, a set time when these things are going to take place. And it says to slay the third part of men, you know, because again, you have 3 classes of men on the earth. You have the sons of God, which today are the biblical Israelites, so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, the tribe of Judah, all the way down to the tribe of Issachar. You have the sons of men, which are the different heathen nations. And you have the sons of the wicked, which today are the Edomites, you know, you so-called white people. You know, that's who this destruction is for. You know, it's for you, you know. But 2/3 of the nation of Israel are going to get caught up in it. And then you heathens, you know, you're just collateral damage. You're going to get caught up in it as well. You know, those of you that are able to flee Babylon before that time comes, you know. So, Lord willing, this lesson was edifying. I want to give all praise, honor, and glory due to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash. I'd like to give double honors unto the apostles and the artists of Great Millstone, who I learned this truth from. And I'd like to say peace and salutations unto the hopefully elect. Till next time I say, Shalom.